Maldives is an archipelagic state located in South Asia, situated in the Indian Ocean. It lies southwest of Sri Lanka and India, about 750 kilometers, 470 miles, 400 nautical miles, from the Asian continent's mainland. The chain of 26 atolls stretches across the equator from Ayavandipolu Atoll in the north to Adu Atoll in the south, comprising a territory spanning roughly 90,000 square kilometers, 35,000 square miles, including the sea. Land area of all the islands comprises 298 square kilometers, 115 square miles. Maldives is one of the world's most geographically dispersed sovereign states and the smallest Asian country, as well as one of the smallest Muslim-majority countries by land area and, with around 557,751 inhabitants, the second least populous country in Asia. Male is the capital and the most populated city, traditionally called the King's Island, where the ancient royal dynasties ruled, for its central location. The Maldivian archipelago is located on the Chagos Laccadive Ridge, a vast submarine mountain range in the Indian Ocean. This also forms a terrestrial ecoregion, together with the Chagos Archipelago and Lakshadweep, Dweep, with an average ground level elevation of 1.5 meters, 4 feet 11 in, above sea level, and a highest natural point of only 2.4 meters. It is the world's lowest lying country. Note that some sources state the highest point, Mount Villanilli, as 5.1 meters. In the 12th century Islam reached the Maldivian archipelago, which was consolidated as a sultanate, developing strong commercial and cultural ties with Asia and Africa. From the mid-16th century, the region came under the increasing influence of European colonial powers, with Maldives becoming a British protectorate in 1887. Independence from the United Kingdom came in 1965, and a presidential republic was established in 1968 with an elected People's Majlis. The ensuing decades have seen political instability, efforts at democratic reform, and environmental challenges posed by climate change and rising sea levels. Maldives became a founding member of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC. It is also a member of the United Nations, the Commonwealth of Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the Non-Aligned Movement. The World Bank classifies the Maldives as having an upper-middle income economy. Fishing has historically been the dominant economic activity, and remains the largest sector by far, followed by the rapidly growing tourism industry. The Maldives rates high on the Human Development Index, with per capita income significantly higher than other SAARC nations. Maldives was a member of the Commonwealth of Nations from July 1982 until withdrawing from the organization in October 2016 in protest of allegations by other nations of its human rights abuses and failing democracy. Maldives rejoined the Commonwealth on 1 February 2020 after showing evidence of functioning democratic processes and popular support. Etymology - According to legends, the first settlers of Maldives were people known as Dheevis. The first kingdom of the Maldives was known as Tevanmari. During the 3rd century BCE visit of emissaries, it was noted that the Maldives was known as Deva Mahal. During circa 1100 to 1166, Maldives was also referred to as Devakudha, and the Laccadive archipelago, which was a part of Maldives, was then referred to as Devakanbar by the scholar and polymath Al-Biruni, 973 to 1048. The name Maldives may also derive from Sanskrit mala, garland, and Dvipa, island, or Maladivana, necklace islands. In Sinhala, the Maldivian people are called Divuin. The word Dheeb, Deeb, archaic Divi, related to Sanskrit. Dvipa, means island, and Dives, Divuin, means islanders, i.e., Maldivians. In Tamil, garland of islands can be translated as Malathivu. The ancient Sri Lankan chronicle Mahavamsa refers to an island called Mahiladiva, island of women, in Pali, which is probably a mistranslation of the same Sanskrit word meaning garland. Janhogen Dawn, Grossman Professor of Economics at Colby College, theorized that the name Maldives derives from the Sanskrit Maladvipa, meaning garland of islands. In Malayalam, garland of islands can be translated as Maladvipu. In Kannada, garland of islands can be translated as Maldvipa. None of these names are mentioned in any literature, but classical Sanskrit texts dating back to the Vedic period mention the 100,000 islands, Lakshadweepa, a generic name which would include not only the Maldives, but also the Laccadives, Amini-Divi Islands, Minicoy, and the Chagos Island groups. Medieval Arab travelers such as Ibn Battuta called the islands Mahaldabiyat, from the Arabic word mahal, palace, which must be how the Berber traveler interpreted the local name, having been through Muslim North India, where Perso-Arabic words were introduced to the local vocabulary. This is the name currently inscribed on the scroll in the Maldives state emblem. The classical Persian, Arabic name for Maldives is Dipajat. The Dutch referred to the islands as the Maldiviselanden, pronounced Maldiviselanden, while the British anglicised the local name for the islands first to the Maldive Islands and later to Maldives. In a conversational book published in 1563, Garcia de Orta writes, "I must tell you that I have heard it said that the natives do not call it Maldiva but Nailadiva. In the Malabar language Nail means four and Diva island. So that in that language the word signifies four islands, while we, corrupting the name, call it Maldiva." History - Ancient history and settlement - In the 6th, 5th century BCE, the Maldives already had their kingdoms. The country has an established history of over 2,500 years according to historical evidence and legends. Early settlers in the Maldives were probably Gujaratis who reached and settled Sri Lanka about 500 BCE. Evidence of cultural influence from North India can be deduced from the methods of boat building and silver punch-marked coins. The Mahavamsa, 300 BCE, has records of people from Sri Lanka emigrating to the Maldives. Assuming that cowrie shells come from the Maldives, historians believe that there may have been people living in the Maldives during the Indus Valley Civilization, 3300 to 1300 BCE. A number of artifacts show the presence of Hinduism in the country before the Islamic period. According to the book Kitab Fith Armihu al-Kadma, on the ancient ruins of Meidhu, written in the 17th century in Arabic by Allama Ahmed Shihabuddin, Allama Shihabuddin, of Meidhu in Adu Atoll, the first settlers of the Maldives were people known as Dheevis. They came from the Kalabanga in India. The time of their arrival is unknown, but it was before Emperor Asoka's kingdom in 269 to 232 BCE. Shihabuddin's story tallies remarkably well with the recorded history of South Asia and that of the copperplate document of the Maldives known as Loa Mafeanu. The Mapananza, the copper plates on which are recorded the history of the first kings of Maldives from the Solar dynasty, were lost quite early on. A 4th century notice written by Amminus Marcellinus, 362 CE, speaks of gifts sent to the Roman Emperor Julian by a deputation from the nation of Divi. The name Divi is very similar to Dheevi, who were the first settlers of Maldives. The ancient history of Maldives is told in copper plates, ancient scripts carved on coral artifacts, traditions, language and different ethnicities of Maldivians. The first Maldivians did not leave any archaeological artifacts. Their buildings were probably built of wood, palm fronds, and other perishable materials, which would have quickly decayed in the salt and wind of the tropical climate. Moreover, chiefs or headmen did not reside in elaborate stone palaces, nor did their religion require the construction of large temples or compounds. Comparative studies of Maldivian oral, linguistic, and cultural traditions confirm that the first settlers were people from the southern shores of the neighboring Indian subcontinent, including the Giravaru people, mentioned in ancient legends and local folklore about the establishment of the capital and kingly rule in Male. A strong underlying layer of Dravidian and North Indian cultures survives in Maldivian society, with a clear Ilu substratum in the language, which also appears in place names, kinship terms, poetry, dance, and religious beliefs. The North Indian system was brought by the original Sinhalese from Sri Lanka. Malabar and Pandya seafaring culture led to the settlement of the islands by Tamil and Malabar seafarers. The Maldive Islands were mentioned in ancient Sangam Tamil literature as Muniapazanivam or Older Islands of Three Seas. Buddhist period Despite being just mentioned briefly in most history books, the 1,400-year-long Buddhist period has a foundational importance in the history of the Maldives. It was during this period that the culture of the Maldives both developed and flourished. A culture that survives today. The Maldivian language, early Maldive scripts, architecture, ruling institutions, customs, and manners of the Maldivians originated at the time when the Maldives were a Buddhist kingdom. Buddhism probably spread to the Maldives in the 3rd century BCE at the time of Emperor Ashoka's expansion and became the dominant religion of the people of the Maldives until the 12th century. The ancient Maldivian kings promoted Buddhism, and the first Maldive writings and artistic achievements, in the form of highly developed sculpture and architecture, originate from that period. Nearly all archaeological remains in the Maldives are from Buddhist stupas and monasteries, and all artifacts found to date display characteristic Buddhist iconography. Buddhist and Hindu temples were mandala-shaped. They are oriented according to the 4 cardinal points with the main gate facing east. Local historian Hassan Ahmed Manikou counted as many as 59 islands with Buddhist archaeological sites in a provisional list he published in 1990. Islamic period The importance of the Arabs as traders in the Indian Ocean by the 12th century may partly explain why the last Buddhist king of Maldives, Dovemi, converted to Islam in the year 1153, or 1193. Adopting the Muslim title of Sultan Muhammad al-Adil, he initiated a series of 6 Islamic dynasties that lasted until 1932 when the Sultanate became elective. The formal title of the Sultan up to 1965 was Sultan of Land and Sea, Lord of the 12,000 Islands and Sultan of the Maldives, which came with the style Highness. A Muslim Berber from Morocco, Abu al-Barakat Yusuf al-Barbari, is traditionally credited for this conversion. According to the story told to Ibn Battuta, a mosque was built with the inscription, "The Sultan Ahmad Shah Nurizu accepted Islam at the hand of Abu al-Barakat Yusuf al-Barbari." Some scholars have suggested the possibility of Ibn Battuta misreading Maldive texts, and having a bias towards the North African, Maghrebi narrative of this sheikh, instead of the East African origins account that was known as well at the time. Even when Ibn Battuta visited the islands, the governor of the island at that time was Abdaziz al-Mogadishawi, a Somali. Somalis have a legend which claims Abu al-Barakat Yusuf al-Barbari as a native of Barbara, a significant trading port on the northwestern coast of Somalia. Barbara or Barbaro, Berbers, as the ancestors of the Somalis were referred to by medieval Arab and ancient Greek geographers, respectively. This is also seen when Ibn Battuta visited Mogadishu. He mentions that the Sultan at that time, Abu Bakr ibn Sheikh Omar, was a Berber, Somali. According to scholars, Abu al-Barakat Yusuf al-Barbari was Yusuf bin Ahmad al-Qornain, a famous native Somali scholar known for establishing the Wallishma dynasty of the Horn of Africa. After his conversion of the population of Doga, now known as Orbarkadal, a town in Somalia, he is also credited to have been responsible for spreading Islam in the Maldivian islands, establishing the Hukuru Miski, and converting the Maldivian population to Islam. Ibn Battuta states the Maldivian king was converted by Abu al-Barakat Yusuf al-Barbari, blessed father of Somalia. Others have it he may have been from the Persian town of Tabriz. The first reference to an Iranian origin dates to an 18th century Persian text. His venerated tomb now stands on the grounds of Medhuzuarai, across the street from the Friday Mosque, or Hukuru Miski, in Male, built in 1656. This is the oldest mosque in the Maldives. Following the Islamic concept that before Islam there was the time of Jahiliyyah, ignorance, in the history books used by Maldivians, the introduction of Islam at the end of the 12th century is considered the cornerstone of the country's history. Nonetheless, The cultural influence of Buddhism remains a reality directly experienced by Ibn Battuta during his 9 months there sometime between 1341 and 1345. Serving as a chief judge and marrying into the royal family of Omar Ifa, he became embroiled in local politics and left when his strict judgments in the laissez-faire island kingdom began to chafe with its rulers. In particular, he was dismayed at the local women going about with no clothing above the waist, a violation of Middle Eastern Islamic standards of modesty, and the locals taking no notice. When he complained, compared to the other areas of South Asia, the conversion of the Maldives to Islam happened relatively late. Arab traders had converted populations in the Malabar coast since the 7th century, and Muhammad bin Qasim had converted large swathes of Sind to Islam at about the same time. The Maldives remained a Buddhist kingdom for another 500 years after the conversion of Malabar coast and Sind. Perhaps as the southwesternmost Buddhist country, Arabic became the prime language of administration, instead of Persian and Urdu, and the Maliki school of jurisprudence was introduced, both hinting at direct contact with the core of the Arab world. Middle Eastern seafarers had just begun to take over the Indian Ocean trade routes in the 10th century and found the Maldives to be an important link in those routes as the first landfall for traders from Basra sailing to Southeast Asia. Trade involved mainly cowrie shells, widely used as a form of currency throughout Asia and parts of the East African coast, and coir fiber. The Bengal Sultanate, where cowrie shells were used as legal tender, was one of the principal trading partners of the Maldives. The Bengal-Maldives cowrie shell trade was the largest shell currency trade network in history. The other essential product of the Maldives was coir, the fiber of the dried coconut husk, resistant to salt water. It stitched together and rigged the dhows that plied the Indian Ocean. Maldivian coir was exported to Sind, China, Yemen, and the Persian Gulf. Colonial period. In 1558, the Portuguese established a small garrison with a viador, vizoaru, or overseer of a factory, trading post, in the Maldives, which they administered from their main colony in Goa. Their attempts to impose Christianity provoked a local revolt led by Muhammad Thakurufanu al-Azam, his two brothers and Huvafaru Dandale, who 15 years later drove the Portuguese out of Maldives. This event is now commemorated as National Day. In the mid-17th century, the Dutch, who had replaced the Portuguese as the dominant power in Ceylon, established hegemony over Maldivian affairs without involving themselves directly in local matters, which were governed according to centuries-old Islamic customs. The British expelled the Dutch from Ceylon in 1796 and included the Maldives as a British protectorate. The status of Maldives as a British protectorate was officially recorded in an 1887 agreement in which the Sultan Muhammad Mu'in-ud-Din II accepted British influence over Maldivian external relations and defence while retaining home rule, which continued to be regulated by Muslim traditional institutions in exchange for an annual tribute. The status of the islands was akin to other British protectorates in the Indian Ocean region, including Zanzibar and the Trucial States. In the British period, the Sultan's powers were taken over by the Chief Minister, much to the chagrin of the British Governor-General who continued to deal with the ineffectual Sultan. Consequently, Britain encouraged the development of a constitutional monarchy, and the first constitution was proclaimed in 1932. However, the new arrangements favoured neither the ageing Sultan nor the wily Chief Minister, but rather a young crop of British-educated reformists. As a result, angry mobs were instigated against the constitution which was publicly torn up. The Maldives remained a British Crown protectorate until 1953 when the Sultanate was suspended and the First Republic was declared under the short-lived presidency of Muhammad Amin Didi. While serving as Prime Minister during the 1940s, Didi nationalized the fish export industry. As President, he is remembered as a reformer of the education system and an advocate of women's rights. Conservatives in Male ousted his government, and during a riot over food shortages, Didi was beaten by a mob and died on a nearby island. Beginning in the 1950s, the political history in the Maldives was largely influenced by the British military presence on the islands. In 1954, The restoration of the Sultanate perpetuated the rule of the past. 2 years later, the United Kingdom obtained permission to re-establish its wartime Afghan airfield in the southernmost Adu atoll, employing hundreds of locals. In 1957, however, the new Prime Minister, Ibrahim Nazir, called for a review of the agreement. Nazir was challenged in 1959 by a local secessionist movement in the three southernmost atolls that benefited economically from the British presence on Gan. This group cut ties with the Maldives government and formed an independent state, the United Shuvadive Republic, with Abdullah Afif as president and Thadu as its capital. 1 year later the Shuvadive Republic was scrapped after Nazir sent gunboats from Male with government police, and Abdullah Afif went into exile. Meanwhile, in 1960 the Maldives allowed the United Kingdom to continue to use both the Gan and the Thadu facilities for 30 years. With the payment of £750,000 from 1960 to 1965 for Maldives' economic development. The base was closed in 1976 as part of the larger British withdrawal of permanently stationed forces east of Suez. Independence and Republic. When the British became increasingly unable to continue their colonial hold on Asia and were losing their colonies to the indigenous populations who wanted freedom, on the 26th of July 1965 an agreement was signed on behalf of the Sultan by Ibrahim Nazir and Bandiri Khalid Jafan, Prime Minister, and on behalf of the British government by Sir Michael Walker, British Ambassador Designate to the Maldive Islands, which formally ended the British authority on the defence and external affairs of the Maldives. The islands thus achieved independence, with the ceremony taking place at the British High Commissioner's residence in Colombo. After this, the Sultanate continued for another 3 years under Sir Mohammed Faid Didi, who declared himself king upon independence. On the 15th of November 1967, a vote was taken in Parliament to decide whether the Maldives should continue as a constitutional monarchy or become a republic. Of the 44 members of Parliament, 40 voted in favour of a republic. On the 15th of March 1968, a national referendum was held on the question, and 93.34% of those taking part voted in favour of establishing a republic. The republic was declared on the 11th of November 1968, thus ending the 853-year-old monarchy, which was replaced by a republic under the presidency of Ibrahim Nazir. As the king had held little real power, this was seen as a cosmetic change and required few alterations in the structures of government. Tourism began to be developed on the archipelago by the beginning of the 1970s. The first resort in the Maldives was Kurumba Maldives, which welcomed the first guests on the 3rd of October 1972. The first accurate census was held in December 1977 and showed 142,832 people living in the Maldives. Political infighting during the 1970s between Nazir's faction and other political figures led to the 1975 arrest and exile of elected Prime Minister Ahmed Zaki to a remote atoll. Economic decline followed the closure of the British airfield at Gan and the collapse of the market for dried fish, an important export. With support for his administration faltering, Nazir fled to Singapore in 1978, with millions of dollars from the treasury. Maumoon Abdul Gayoom began his 30-year role as president in 1978, winning 6 consecutive elections without opposition. His election was seen as ushering in a period of political stability and economic development given Maumoon's priority to develop the poorer islands. Tourism flourished and increased foreign contact spurred development. However, Maumoon's rule was controversial, with some critics saying Maumoon was an autocrat who quelled dissent by limiting freedoms and political favoritism. A series of coup attempts, in 1980, 1983, and 1988, by Nazir supporters and business interests tried to topple the government without success. While the first 2 attempts met with little success, the 1988 coup attempt involved a roughly 80-strong mercenary force of the PLO who seized the airport and caused Maumoon to flee from house to house until the intervention of 1,600 Indian troops airlifted into Male restored order. The November 1988 coup d'état was headed by Ibrahim Lutfi, a businessman in situ. Ahmed Ismail Manik, who is the father of the current First Lady of Maldives Fazna Ahmed. The attackers were defeated by then National Security Services of Maldives. On the night of the 3rd of November 1988, the Indian Air Force airlifted a parachute battalion group from Agra and flew them over 2,000 kilometers, 1,200 miles, to the Maldives. By the time Indian armed forces reached the Maldives, the mercenary forces has already left Mail on the hijacked ship MV Progress Light. The Indian paratroopers landed at Hull and secured the airfield and restored the government rule at Mail within hours. The brief operation, labeled Operation Cactus, also involved the Indian Navy that assisted in capturing the freighter MV Progress Light and rescued the hostages and crew. 21st century The Maldives were devastated by a tsunami on the 26th of December 2004, following the Indian Ocean earthquake. Only 9 islands were reported to have escaped any flooding, while 57 islands faced serious damage to critical infrastructure. 14 islands had to be totally evacuated, and 6 islands were destroyed. A further 21 resort islands were forced to close because of tsunami damage. The total damage was estimated at more than $400 million, or some 62% of the GDP. 102 Maldivians and 6 foreigners reportedly died in the tsunami. The destructive impact of the waves on the low-lying islands was mitigated by the fact there was no continental shelf or land mass upon which the waves could gain height. The tallest waves were reported to be 14 feet, 4.3 meters, high. During the later part of Mormoon's rule, independent political movements emerged in the Maldives, which challenged the then-ruling Divi-Raid-Hunj Party, Maldivian People's Party, MPP, and demanded democratic reform. The dissident journalist and activist Mohammed Nasheed founded the Maldivian Democratic Party, MDP, in 2003 and pressured Mormoon into allowing gradual political reforms. In 2008, a new constitution was approved and the first direct presidential elections occurred, which were won by Nasheed in the second round. His administration faced many challenges, including the huge debt left by the previous government, the economic downturn following the 2004 tsunami, overspending by means of overprinting of local currency, the rufiya, unemployment, corruption, and increasing drug use. Taxation on goods was imposed for the first time in the country, and import duties were reduced on many goods and services. Social welfare benefits were given to those aged 65 years or older, single parents, and those with special needs. Social and political unrest grew in late 2011, following opposition campaigns in the name of protecting Islam. Nasheed controversially resigned from office after a large number of police and army mutinied in February 2012. Nasheed's vice president, Mohammed Wade Hassan, was sworn in as president. Nasheed was later arrested, convicted of terrorism, and sentenced to 13 years. The trial was widely seen as flawed and political. The UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention called for Nasheed's immediate release. The elections in late 2013 were highly contested. Former President Nasheed won the most votes in the first round, but the Supreme Court annulled it despite the positive assessment of international election observers. In the rerun vote, Abdullah Yameen, half-brother of the former President Mormoon, assumed the presidency. Yameen survived an assassination attempt in late 2015. Vice President Ahmed Adib was later arrested together with 17 supporters for public order offenses, and the government instituted a broader crackdown against his accomplices. A state of emergency was later declared ahead of a planned anti-government rally, and the People's Majlis accelerated the removal of Adib. In the 2018 elections, Ibrahim Mohamed Solih won the most votes, and was sworn in as the Maldives' new president in November 2018. Adib was freed by courts in May in July 2019 after his conviction on charges of terrorism and corruption was overruled, but was placed under a travel ban after the state prosecutor appealed the order in a corruption and money laundering case. Adib escaped in a tugboat to seek asylum in India. It is understood that the Indian Coast Guard escorted the tugboat to the International Maritime Boundary Line, IMBL, and he was then transferred to a Maldivian Coast Guard ship, where officials took him into custody. Former President Abdullah Yameen was sentenced to 5 years in prison in November 2019 for money laundering. The High Court upheld the jail sentence in January 2021. However, Supreme Court overturned Yameen's conviction in November 2021. Geography The Maldives consists of 1,192 coral islands grouped in a double chain of 26 atolls, that stretch along a length of 871 kilometers, 541 miles, north to south, 130 kilometers, 81 miles, east to west, spread over roughly 90,000 square kilometers, 35,000 square miles, of which only 298 square kilometers, 115 square miles, is dry land, making this one of the world's most dispersed countries. It lies between latitudes 1 degree south and 8 degrees north, and longitudes 72 degrees and 74 degrees east. The atolls are composed of live coral reefs and sandbars, situated atop a submarine ridge 960 kilometers, 600 miles, long that rises abruptly from the depths of the Indian Ocean and runs north to south. Only near the southern end of this natural coral barricade do two open passages permit safe ship navigation from one side of the Indian Ocean to the other through the territorial waters of Maldives. For administrative purposes, the Maldivian government organized these atolls into 21 administrative divisions. The largest island of Maldives is that of Gan, which belongs to Lamu Atoll or Hardhamithi Maldives. In Adu Atoll, the westernmost islands are connected by roads over the reef, collectively called Link Road, and the total length of the road is 14 kilometers, 9 miles. Maldives is the lowest country in the world, with maximum and average natural ground levels of only 2.4 meters, 7 feet 10 in, and 1.5 meters, 4 feet 11 in, above sea level, respectively, in areas where construction exists. However, this has been increased to several meters. More than 80% of the country's land is composed of coral islands which rise less than 1 meter above sea level. As a result, the Maldives are at high risk of being submerged due to rising sea levels. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned that, at current rates, sea level rise would be high enough to make the Maldives uninhabitable by 2100. Climate The Maldives has a tropical monsoon climate, under the Köppen climate classification, which is affected by the large landmass of South Asia to the north. Because the Maldives has the lowest elevation of any country in the world, the temperature is constantly hot and often humid. The presence of this landmass causes differential heating of land and water. These factors set off a rush of moisture-rich air from the Indian Ocean over South Asia, resulting in the southwest monsoon. Two seasons dominate Maldives weather: the dry season associated with the winter northeastern monsoon and the rainy season associated with the southwest monsoon, which brings strong winds and storms. The shift from the dry northeast monsoon to the moist southwest monsoon occurs during April and May. During this period, the southwest winds contribute to the formation of the southwest monsoon, which reaches Maldives at the beginning of June and lasts until the end of November. However, the weather patterns of Maldives do not always conform to the monsoon patterns of South Asia. The annual rainfall average is 254 centimeters, 100 in the north, and 381 centimeters, 150 in the south. The monsoonal influence is greater in the north of the Maldives than in the south, more influenced by the equatorial currents. The average high temperature is 31.5 degrees Celsius and the average low temperature is 26.4 degrees Celsius. Sea level rise. In 1988, Maldivian authorities claimed that sea rise would completely cover this Indian Ocean nation of 1,196 small islands within the next 30 years. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 2007 report predicted the upper limit of the sea level rise will be 59 centimeters, 23 in, by 2100, which means that most of the Republic's 200 inhabited islands may need to be abandoned. According to researchers from the University of Southampton, the Maldives are the third most endangered island nation due to flooding from climate change as a percentage of population. Former President Mohammed Nasheed said in 2012 that if carbon emissions continue at the rate they are climbing today, my country will be underwater in 7 years. He has called for more climate change mitigation action while on the American television shows The Daily Show and The Late Show with David Letterman, and hosted the world's first underwater cabinet meeting in 2009 to raise awareness of the threats posed by climate change. Concerns over rising sea levels have also been expressed by Nasheed's predecessor, Maumoon Abdul Gayoom. In 2008, Nasheed announced plans to look into purchasing new land in India, Sri Lanka, and Australia because of his concerns about global warming, and the possibility of much of the islands being inundated with water from rising sea levels. The purchase of land will be made from a fund generated by tourism. The president explained his intentions. We do not want to leave the Maldives, but we also do not want to be climate refugees living in tents for decades. By 2020, Maldives plans to eliminate or offset all of its greenhouse gas emissions. At the 2009 International Climate Talks, Nasheed explained that, for us swearing off fossil fuels is not only the right thing to do, but it is also in our economic self-interest. Pioneering countries will free themselves from the unpredictable price of foreign oil. They will capitalize on the new green economy of the future, and they will enhance their moral standing, giving them greater political influence on the world stage. In 2020, a 3-year study at the University of Plymouth found that as tides move sediment to create higher elevation, the islands, and also Tuvalu and Kiribati, may rise instead of sink. Environmental issues other than sea level rise include bad waste disposal and beach theft. Although the Maldives are kept relatively pristine and little litter can be found on the islands, no good waste disposal sites exist. Most trash from Mail and other resorts is simply dumped at the Thilafusi landfill. 31 protected areas are administered by the Ministry of Environment and Energy and Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, of the Maldives. Marine ecosystem. The Maldives have a range of different habitats including deep sea, shallow coast, and reef ecosystems, fringing mangroves, wetlands and dry land. There are 187 species of coral forming the coral reefs. This area of the Indian Ocean, alone, houses 1,100 species of fish, 5 species of sea turtle, 21 species of whale and dolphin, 400 species of mollusk, and 83 species of echinoderms. The area is also populated by a number of crustacean species, 120 copepods, 15 amphipods, as well as more than 145 crab and 48 shrimp species. Among the many marine families represented are pufferfish, fusiliers, jackfish, lionfish, oriental sweetlips, reef sharks, groupers, eels, snappers, bannerfish, batfish, humphead wrasse, spotted eagle rays, scorpionfish, lobsters, nudie brunches, angelfish, butterflyfish, squirrelfish, soldierfish, glassfish, surgeonfish, unicornfish, triggerfish, Napoleon wrasse, and barracuda. These coral reefs are home to a variety of marine ecosystems that vary from planktonic organisms to whale sharks. Sponges have gained importance as 5 species have displayed anti-tumor and anti-cancer properties. In 1998, sea temperature warming of as much as 5 degrees Celsius, 9.0 degrees Fahrenheit, due to a single El Niño phenomenon event caused coral bleaching, killing 2/3 of the nation's coral reefs. In an effort to induce the regrowth of the reefs, scientists placed electrified cones anywhere from 20 to 60 feet, 6.1 to 18.3 meters, below the surface to provide a substrate for larval coral attachment. In 2004, scientists witnessed corals regenerating. Corals began to eject pink-orange eggs and sperm. The growth of these electrified corals was 5 times faster than untreated corals. Scientist Aziz Hakim stated, "Before 1998, we never thought that this reef would die. We had always taken for granted that these animals would be there, that this reef would be there forever. El Nino gave us a wake-up call that these things are not going to be there forever. Not only this, but they also act as a natural barrier against tropical storms, floods and tsunamis. Seaweeds grow on the skeletons of dead coral." Again, in 2016, the coral reefs of the Maldives experienced a severe bleaching incident. Up to 95% of coral around some islands have died, and, even after 6 months, 100% of young coral transplants died. The surface water temperatures reached an all-time high in 2016, at 31 degrees Celsius in May. Recent scientific studies suggest that the faunistic composition can vary greatly between neighbor atolls, especially in terms of benthic fauna. Differences in terms of fishing pressure, including poaching, could be the cause. Government Maldives is a presidential constitutional republic, with extensive influence of the president as head of government and head of state. The president heads the executive branch, and appoints the cabinet, which is approved by the People's Majlis, parliament. He leads the armed forces. The current president as of the 19th of October 2021 is Ibrahim Mohammed Solih. President and members of the unicameral Majlis serve 5-year terms, with the total number of members determined by atoll populations. At the 2014 election, 77 members were elected. The People's Majlis, located in Male, houses members from all over the country. The Republican Constitution came into force in 1968 and was amended in 1970, 1972, and 1975. On the 27th of November 1997 it was replaced by another constitution assented to by then-President Mormoon. This constitution came into force on the 1st of January 1998. The current constitution of Maldives was ratified by President Mormoon on the 7th of August 2008, and came into effect immediately, replacing and repealing the constitution of 1998. This new constitution includes a judiciary run by an independent commission, and independent commissions to oversee elections and fight corruption. It also reduces the executive powers vested under the president and strengthens the parliament. All state that the president is head of state, head of government and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Maldives. In 2018, the then ruling Progressive Party of Maldives, PPMY's tensions with opposition parties and subsequent crackdown was termed as an assault on democracy by the UN human rights chief. In April 2019 parliamentary election, the Maldivian Democratic Party, MDP, of President Ibrahim Mohammed Solih won a landslide victory. It took 65 of 87 seats of the parliament. This was the first time a single party was able to get such a high number of seats in the parliament in Maldivian history. Law According to the Constitution of Maldives, the judges are independent, and subject only to the constitution and the law. When deciding matters on which the constitution or the law is silent, judges must consider Islamic Sharia. Islam is the official religion of the Maldives and open practice of any other religion is forbidden. The 2008 constitution says that the republic is based on the principles of Islam and that no law contrary to any principle of Islam can be applied. Non-Muslims are prohibited from becoming citizens. The requirement to adhere to a particular religion and prohibition of public worship following other religions is contrary to Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, to which Maldives has recently become party and was addressed in Maldives' reservation in adhering to the covenant, claiming that the application of the principles set out in Article 18 of the covenant shall be without prejudice to the Constitution of the Republic of the Maldives. A new penal code came into effect on the 16th of July 2015, replacing the 1968 law, the first modern, comprehensive penal code to incorporate the major tenets and principles of Islamic law. Same-sex relations are illegal in the Maldives, although tourist resorts typically operate as exceptions to this law. Foreign relations. Since 1996, the Maldives has been the official progress monitor of the Indian Ocean Commission. In 2002, the Maldives began to express interest in the Commission, but as of 2008 had not applied for membership. Maldives' interest relates to its identity as a small island state, especially economic development and environmental preservation, and its desire for closer relations with France, a main actor in the IOC region. The Maldives is a founding member of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC. The Republic joined the Commonwealth in 1982, some 17 years after gaining independence from the United Kingdom. In October 2016, Maldives announced its withdrawal from the Commonwealth in protest at allegations of human rights abuse and failing democracy. The Maldives enjoys close ties with Commonwealth members Seychelles and Mauritius. The Maldives and Comoros are also both members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Following his election as president in 2018, Ibrahim Mohamed Solih and his cabinet decided that the Maldives would apply to rejoin the Commonwealth, with readmission occurring on 1 February 2020. As a result of sanctions imposed upon the Russian oligarchs by much of the global community in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, many of them sought refuge for their mega yachts in the Maldives due to the absence of an extradition treaty with the United States and other countries. Military. The Maldives National Defense Force is the combined security organization responsible for defending the security and sovereignty of the Maldives, having the primary task of being responsible for attending to all internal and external security needs of the Maldives, including the protection of the Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ, and the maintenance of peace and security. The MNDF component branches are the Coast Guard, Marine Corps, Special Forces, Service Corps, Defense Intelligence Service, Military Police, Corps of Engineers, Special Protection Group, Medical Corps, Adjutant General's Corps, Coast Guard Aviation Squadron, and the Fire and Rescue Service. The Maldives has an arrangement with India allowing cooperation on radar coverage. As a waterbound nation, much of its security concerns lie at sea. Almost 99% of the country is covered by sea and the remaining 1% land is scattered over an area of 800 kilometers, 497 miles, times 120 kilometers, 75 miles, with the largest island being not more than 8 square kilometers, 3 square miles. Therefore, the duties assigned to the MNDF of maintaining surveillance over Maldives waters and providing protection against foreign intruders poaching in these and territorial waters, are immense tasks from both logistical and economic viewpoints. The Coast Guard plays a vital role in carrying out these functions. To provide timely security, its patrol boats are stationed at various MNDF regional headquarters. The Coast Guard is also assigned to respond to the maritime distress calls and to conduct search and rescue operations in a timely manner. In 2019, Maldives signed the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Human rights. Human rights in the Maldives is a contentious issue. In its 2011 Freedom in the World report, Freedom House declared the Maldives partly free, claiming a reform process which had made headway in 2009 and 2010 had stalled. The United States Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor claims in their 2012 report on human rights practices in the country that the most significant problems are corruption, lack of religious freedom, abuse, and unequal treatment of women. Administrative divisions. The Maldives has 26 natural atolls and few island groups on isolated reefs, all of which have been divided into 21 administrative divisions, 17 administrative atolls and cities of Male, Adu, Fuvamialu and Kulyudhafushi. Each atoll is administered by an elected atoll council. The islands are administered by an elected island council. In addition to a name, Every administrative division is identified by the Maldivian code letters, such as Halif for Thilidhun Matiyu Theraburi, Thilidhun Mathi North, and by a Latin code letter. The first corresponds to the geographical Maldivian name of the atoll. The second is a code adopted for convenience, as there are certain islands in different atolls that have the same name. For administrative purposes, this code is quoted before the name of the island. For example, Barfunadhu, Kafufunadhu, Garfu-Alifufunadhu. Since most atolls have very long geographical names, it is also used whenever the long name is inconvenient, for example in the atoll website names. The introduction of code letter names has been a source of much puzzlement and misunderstandings, especially among foreigners. Many people have come to think that the code letter of the administrative atoll is its new name and that it has replaced its geographical name. Under such circumstances, it is hard to know which is the correct name to use. Economy. Historically, the Maldives provided enormous quantities of cowrie shells, an international currency of the early ages. From the 2nd century CE, the islands were known as the Money Isles by the Arabs. Monetary amanita were used for centuries as a currency in Africa, and huge amounts of Maldivian cowries were introduced into Africa by Western nations during the period of slave trade. The cowrie is now the symbol of the Maldives Monetary Authority. In the early 1970s, the Maldives was one of the world's 20 poorest countries, with a population of 100,000. The economy at the time was largely dependent on fisheries and trading local goods such as coir rope, ambergris, mavaharu, and coco de mer, tavakashi, with neighboring countries and East Asian countries. The Maldivian government began a largely successful economic reform program in the 1980s. Initiated by lifting import quotas and giving more opportunities to the private sector. At the time, tourism sector, which would play a significant role in the nation's development, was at its infant stage. Agriculture and manufacturing continue to play lesser roles in the economy. Constrained by the limited availability of cultivable land and the shortage of domestic labor. Tourism. The Maldives remained largely unknown to tourists until the early 1970s. Only 189 islands are home to its 447,137 inhabitants. The other islands are used entirely for economic purposes, of which tourism and agriculture are the most dominant. Tourism accounts for 28% of the GDP and more than 60% of the Maldives' foreign exchange receipts. Over 90% of government tax revenue comes from import duties and tourism-related taxes. The development of tourism fostered the overall growth of the country's economy. It created direct and indirect employment and income generation opportunities in other related industries. The first tourist resorts were opened in 1972 with Bandos Island Resort and Kurumba Village. The current name is Kurumba Maldives, which transformed the Maldives economy. According to the Ministry of Tourism, the emergence of tourism in 1972 transformed the economy, moving rapidly from dependence on fisheries to tourism. In just 3.5 decades, the industry became the main source of income. Tourism was also the country's biggest foreign currency earner and the single largest contributor to the GDP. As of 2008, 89 resorts in the Maldives offered over 17,000 beds and hosted over 600,000 tourists annually. In 2019, over 1.7 million visitors came to the islands. The number of resorts increased from 2 to 92 between 1972 and 2007. As of 2007, over 8,380,000 tourists had visited Maldives. The country has 6 heritage Maldivian coral mosques listed as UNESCO tentative sites. Visitors to the Maldives do not need to apply for a visa pre-arrival, regardless of their country of origin, provided they have a valid passport, proof of onward travel, and the money to be self-sufficient while in the country. Most visitors arrive at Villano International Airport, on Hulul Island, adjacent to the capital Male. The airport is served by flights to and from India, Sri Lanka, Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Istanbul, and major airports in Southeast Asia, as well as charters from Europe. Gan Airport, on the southern atoll of Adu, also serves an international flight to Milan several times a week. British Airways offers direct flights to the Maldives from Heathrow Airport. Fishing industry. For many centuries the Maldivian economy was entirely dependent on fishing and other marine products. Fishing remains the main occupation of the people and the government gives priority to the fisheries sector. The mechanization of the traditional fishing boat called Doni in 1974 was a major milestone in the development of the fisheries industry. A fish canning plant was installed on Filivaru in 1977, as a joint venture with a Japanese firm. In 1979, a Fisheries Advisory Board was set up with the mandate of advising the government on policy guidelines for the overall development of the fisheries sector. Manpower development programs began in the early 1980s, and fisheries education was incorporated into the school curriculum. Fish aggregating devices and navigational aids were located at various strategic points. Moreover, the opening up of the Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ, of the Maldives for fisheries has further enhanced the growth of the fisheries sector. As of 2010, fisheries contributed over 15% of the country's GDP and engaged about 30% of the country's workforce. Fisheries were also the second largest foreign exchange earner after tourism. Demographics. The largest ethnic group is Divuan, i.e. the Maldivians, native to the historic region of the Maldive Islands comprising today's Republic of Maldives and the island of Minicoy in Union Territory of Lakshadweep, India. They share the same culture and speak the Divi language. They are principally an Indo-Aryan people, having traces of Middle Eastern, South Asian, Austronesian and African genes in the population. In the past, there was also a small Tamil population known as the Giravaru people. This group has now been almost completely absorbed into the larger Maldivian society but were once native to the island of Giravaru, Kafu Atoll. This island was evacuated in 1968 due to heavy erosion of the island. Some social stratification exists on the islands. It is not rigid, since rank is based on varied factors, including occupation, wealth, Islamic virtue, and family ties. Instead of a complex caste system, there was merely a distinction between noble, Beflu, and common people in the Maldives. Members of the social elite are concentrated in male. The population doubled by 1978, and the population growth rate peaked at 3.4% in 1985. At the 2006 census, the population had reached 298,968, although the census in 2000 showed that the population growth rate had declined to 1.9%. Life expectancy at birth stood at 46 years in 1978, and later rose to 72. Infant mortality has declined from 12.7% in 1977 to 1.2% today, and adult literacy reached 99%. Combined school enrollment reached the high 90s. The population was projected to have reached 317,280 in 2010. The 2014 Population and Housing Census listed the total population in Maldives as 437,535. 339,761 resident Maldivians and 97,774 resident foreigners, approximately 16% of the total population. However, it is believed that foreigners have been undercounted. As of May 2021, there were 281,000 expatriate workers, an estimated 63,000 of whom are undocumented in the Maldives. 3,506 Chinese, 5,029 Nepalese, 15,670 Sri Lankans, 28,840 Indians, and, the largest group of foreigners working in the country, 112,588 Bangladeshis. Other immigrants include Filipinos in the Maldives as well as various Western foreign workers. Religion dash. After the long Buddhist period of Maldivian history, Muslim traders introduced Islam. Maldivians converted to Islam by the mid-12th century. The islands have had a long history of Sufic orders, as can be seen in the history of the country, such as the building of tombs. They were used until as recently as the 1980s for seeking the help of buried saints. They can be seen next to some old mosques and are considered a part of Maldives' cultural heritage. Other aspects of tasawwuf, such as ritualized ceremonies called Maulud, the liturgy of which included recitations and certain supplications in a melodic tone, existed until very recent times. These Maulud festivals were held in ornate tents specially built for the occasion. At present, Islam is the official religion of the entire population, as adherence to it is required for citizenship. According to Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta, the person responsible for this conversion was a Sunni Muslim visitor named Abu al-Barakat Yusuf al-Barbari, sailing from Morocco. He is also referred to as Dabraz Fanu. His venerated tomb now stands on the grounds of Medhuzouare, across the street from the Friday Mosque, or Hukaru Miski, in Male, built in 1656. This is the country's oldest mosque. Languages dash. The official and common language is Divi, an Indo-Aryan language closely related to the Sinhala language of Sri Lanka. The first known script used to write Divi is the Viluakuru script, which is found in the historical recording of Kings, Radha Valley. Later a script called Divzakuru was used for a long period. The present-day script is called Thana and is written from right to left. Thanu is said to have been introduced by the reign of Muhammad Thakaru Fanu. English is widely spoken by the locals of the Maldives. Following the nation's opening to the outside world, the introduction of English as a medium of instruction at the secondary and tertiary levels of education, and its government's recognition of the opportunities offered through tourism, English has now firmly established itself in the country. As such, the Maldives are quite similar to the countries in the Gulf region. The nation is undergoing vast societal change, and English is part of this. Population by locality dash. Health dash. On the 24th of May 2021, Maldives had the world's fastest growing COVID-19 outbreak, with the highest number of infections per million people over the prior 7 and 14 days, according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Doctors warned that increasing demand for COVID-19 care could hinder their ability to handle other health emergencies in the Maldives. The reason for the outbreak was the Delta variant. Culture dash. The culture of the Maldives is influenced by the cultures of the people of different ethnicities who have settled on the islands throughout the times. Since the 12th century AD, there were also influences from Arabia in the language and culture of the Maldives because of the conversion to Islam and its location as a crossroads in the central Indian Ocean. This was due to the long trading history between the Far East and the Middle East. Reflective of this is the fact that the Maldives has had the highest national divorce rate in the world for many decades. This, it is hypothesized, is due to a combination of liberal Islamic rules about divorce and the relatively loose marital bonds that have been identified as common in non- and semi-sedentary peoples without a history of fully developed agrarian property and kinship relations. Transportation dash. Volano International Airport is the principal gateway to the Maldives. It is near the capital city Male and is connected by a bridge. International travel is available on government-owned island aviation services. Branded as Maldivian, which operates DHC-6 Twin Otter seaplanes and to nearly all Maldives domestic airports with several Bombardier-8 aircraft, and one Airbus A320 with international service to India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Thailand. In Maldives, there are three main ways to travel between islands: by domestic flight, by seaplane, or by boat. For several years there were two seaplane companies operating, TMA, Trans-Maldivian Airways, and Maldivian Air Taxi, but these merged in 2013 under the name TMA. The seaplane fleet is entirely made up of DHC-6 Twin Otters. There is also another airline, Flyme, which operates using ATR planes to domestic airports. principally Vilimamigili, Dharawandhu and some others. Mantu Air begins its first scheduled seaplane service. Its seaplane fleet is made up of DHC-6 Twin Otter aircraft. In addition to the seaplane service, Mantu Air utilizes ATR 72-600 aircraft to operate domestic flights to Dhalu Airport, Dharawandhu Airport and Kudu Airport from the main Volano International Airport. Depending on the distance of the destination island from the airport, resorts organize speedboat transfers or seaplane flights directly to the resort island jetty for their guests. Several daily flights operate from Volano International Airport to the 18 domestic and international airports in the country. Scheduled ferries also operate from Male to many of the atolls. The traditional Maldivian boat is called a dhonie. Speedboats and seaplanes tend to be more expensive, while travel by dhonie, although slower, is relatively cheaper and convenient. Education. The Maldives National University is one of the country's 3 institutions of higher education. Its mission statement is as follows: to create, discover, preserve and disseminate knowledge that is necessary to enhance the lives and livelihoods of people and essential for the cultural, social and economic development of the society so that this nation shall remain free and Islamic forever. In 1973, the Allied Health Services Training Center, the forerunner of the Faculty of Health Sciences, was established by the Ministry of Health. The Vocational Training Center was established in 1974, providing training for mechanical and electrical trades. In 1984, the Institute for Teacher Education was created and the School of Hotel and Catering Services was established in 1987 to provide trained personnel for the tourist industry. In 1991, the Institute of Management and Administration was created to train staff for public and private services. In 1998, the Maldives College of Higher Education was founded. The Institute of Sharia and Law was founded in January 1999. In 2000 the college launched its first degree program, Bachelor of Arts. On the 17th of January 2011 the Maldives National University Act was passed by the President of the Maldives. The Maldives National University was named on the 15th of February 2011. In 2015 under a presidential decree the College of Islamic Studies was changed into the Islamic University of Maldives, IUM.